Welcome to part 2 of the Nedbank Eduseries and episode 3 of Where Are They Now? I'm your host, Kopano Shimange. 1 year ago, we sat with Yolenda Jawe to speak about first-time home buying for young professionals. We're checking up today to find out what has changed, what has evolved, and what's still to come.
So I got out of varsity, graduated, and so excited because I studied finance and investment. So I thought, oh, I've got this. I know everything that this journey entails. Walked into a Nedbank branch and was shook, to say the least. I was shocked to find out that what I thought was going to be a simple, here's my payslip, let me sign, let me get the home, was, ma'am, you don't have a credit record.
Hi, y'all.
Hi, Kopano.
How have you been?
I have been very well, thank you. How have you been?
I've been amazing. Before we get started, I want to say you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. So do you, as always.
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, you have, since the last time we've spoken, started something digital of your own?
Yes, so I actually started yours on finance, and this is a more specific community that really aims at teaching young men and women around financial literacy basics on how we can better manage and level up our financial skills. Because it's not the fact that we don't know how to budget. It's just the little things on the daily routine. How do we implement these things in a more practical way, especially as young Black individuals? So I'm here to be a big sis to both bros and sisters.
You were a big sis on that seat when we were speaking about first-time home buying when we spoke last year. You dropped so many truths about first-time home buying. I want to know from you, what digital thrills have you discovered about home buying since last year?
Oh my goodness. So, and I tell this to all my friends, I relied a lot on the branch. So as you know my story with my Nedbank, my first Nedbank home loan, I had to go to the branch to learn about everything. The Money app now allows you to literally go on the app and have a conversation with somebody to assist you. And that's literally a financial advisor, so to say, that you can reach and have a full conversation on what you need. So now that my home loan is about 10, 11 years old this year, I've been thinking about leveraging. So I literally went onto the chat and found out how I can leverage the current property that I have in terms of equity that I can get out of it. So getting it revalued and seeing if it's doubled in value and what can I do with that extra portion? Can I access it? Can I use it to buy another mortgage? Can I refinance my existing? Oh, so as you can see, it's been a financial, like I was geeking over the fact that I did all of this in the comfort of my own home, sitting in bed, to be specific. And it's just a huge financial thrill, particularly because I didn't have this 10 years ago.
Now, you were 22 years old. You were a young professional yourself. When you thought about taking that leap, what was it that gave you that inspiration? Like you said, there was hesitation. But on the other side, what was that inspiration that made you take the leap finally?
So usually when people buy houses, they either buy it for one of two reasons, either for investment purposes or an emotional decision, right? You make it off the back of how it will make you feel. For me, that's exactly why I made the decision. Peace of mind. My mom was renting for years and we were moving place to place year after year. When my brother went off to varsity, he was staying at Res, we had to downgrade. When he came back home, we had to get a bigger home because now there's three of us, you know, 3 kids and my mom. So we had those instabilities, and for me, stability was the one thing I knew would give me peace of mind and security of knowing we've got a home. I think there's nothing better. Again, as a young Black girl who's South African, you think of a home and you think, I can lay my head without thinking of my landlord possibly selling. Sometimes it's not because you're not affording the rent, but people sell their homes and now you've got to move. And that up and down does create emotional and physical instability. Where's your home? So I really wanted to give myself that, my siblings, and of course my mom, that little break, Gubuti, Sinaye Ekaya. We have somewhere to call home.
So when you contrast that, 22-year-old Yols, young professional herself, buying her first home to where you are now, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
Ooh, since then, to be fair, I think it's accessing more information. I'm glad we're living in a digital age, of course, and I'm glad now I don't have to go like the extra lengths. I was trying to get information from human beings only.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for AI and like the internet. So internet banking, Nedbank internet banking can give you information. Your app can give you information. You don't have to go in. And when you do go in and somebody doesn't know, so for instance, a consultant, which never happens, but if they don't, they quickly have these iPads and they just chick, here's the information that you need. So I love the fact that so much information is more available now. And the biggest contrast now is before any financial decision, I go back and I look at what's been updated. How is the economy doing? At the time, I was only basing it on 2008. Now I can work on future scenarios like COVID. Should another pandemic happen, how much of an economic and financial buffer do I need to cover myself? And again, you can use a spreadsheet, but you can also use AI, ChatGPT, to literally Google and plan ahead. Should I want to know how much I pre-qualify for? On the app now. I needed to go to the bank back then, like I say. Should I need extra information? I know my banker can give me this information at the click of my fingers. So I think for me, that's been the biggest change, and also the most exciting thing about living 10, 20, 11 years later now, being older, and also knowing that I can research more. Back then, I feel as though because information was limited, I worked with what I had.
So there is a young professional listening to this conversation saying, 22-year-old Yolanda went to a banker, spoke to him, and found out what she can do in terms of buying a home. And they want to buy their first home as well. What would your advice be to them in this moment as a young professional trying to make that decision?
Sure. Ask all the questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question because money is involved. Money is no respecter of whether you are smart or whether you are dumb. So because there's going to be an exchange at some point, please make sure that you've covered all your bases, and also ask what hidden cost exists, because the reality is, which I mentioned last time, there were so many shockers. Once I was waiting for the key. I wasn't given a key, I was given paperwork and a list of costs to expect once I have my home. So I think for me, that's literally what I'd give advice to somebody who was young, excited. There's a thrill to buying a home, but there's a reality that exists. You have to face the consequences of your decisions. And at the end of the month, once again, any bond comes with friends in the name of costs, you know. So ask all the questions that you need, and also look at the location. If there's one thing I should have done better is look at whether or not my property would appreciate. And because technology now allows you to look at, you know, future projections, read as much as you can. There are reports out there. You can look at an area and say, okay, what are the cap rates? So in other words, how will this appreciate? And if I were to leave this home, get a new one, how much rental would I get out of this? Is there a good rental yield? And your yield is really like the profit that you would get out of it after all your costs have been covered. So I didn't think of that back then, but I've been forced to look at those and make that exercise, particularly because now we're looking at other investment options, and we are looking at the first property as now an option to either sell or to hold. And if we do hold, how can we make the best out of this situation?
What I want to know, there are definitely challenges and things we have to learn with first-time home buying.
Lots.
But I want to know from you, what were some of the financial thrills that you weren't expecting, but you're experiencing now?
Oh, like I mentioned now, leveraging. I think looking back 10 years ago, because it was an emotional decision, I did not know that there'd be such a huge investment opportunity looking back at my home. It actually did double in value. So I'm really glad. And again, I'm like, phew, I didn't look at the location, didn't look at the property prices and how they would grow or regress over the years. And not every property appreciates as you think. You know, the numbers don't lie. So you have to look at it, and it's area specific. So thankfully, my mom is a real estate agent. So she's been doing the numbers for me. She's like, oh, our neighbor sold their house for X amount, and our house is actually valued more. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I speak to my banker. Do we need to get a valuer? They told me, actually, look at your statements since 10 years ago. I didn't even know. Wow. If you look at your municipal statements, you can actually see how council or municipality has valued your property over the past few years. And you can see the growth, right? So when you are selling, you get a valuer to go over, or if you want equity out of your property, or you want to refinance. So those opportunities I didn't know existed 10 years ago.
I love that there's so many benefits to it, and the increase in value of your property. From what you invested and what it is now over the 11 years that you have owned the house, That is amazing news.
Thank you so much. It's a relief. I think for me, I'm like, not that they're knowing to you. You've been paying off a home that's not growing in value. But it happens as well, particularly if you are in a market like we have been, in an economy that's been so unstable. But again, I'm put in Cape Town, and we all know what's happening with the Cape Town property prices. So yeah, I think for me, it was just a little lucky shot, but I could have done better in terms of my research back then.
And now there's access to information from the comfort of your home, on your phone. You can contact your banker.
Yeah.
I want to find out, young people may think that, oh no, if I buy a home, I have to limit my lifestyle. It's going to change how I live and how I enjoy my money. What are the considerations they have to have when it's time for them to buy a home?
My friend actually calls it a cost-benefit analysis. It's actually an economic term. It's really important to look at how we live now, right? So right now in Sandton, you can rent a place, for instance, for 20,000 Rand. And you may not be able to afford that property for a bond of that size here in Sandton. The most important thing is to look at what you can actually afford versus what you can qualify. Too many of us qualify for high bonds. Don't take it. What do you actually afford is the more important thing. If you can afford 20,000 Rand rent, then look for a bond that's maybe 2,000, 3,000 Rand less. Remember, your bond is the minimum. The current installment that you're paying is the minimum you'll pay in the year. Why? Because you've got interest rates that rise. But with your rent, that is the maximum you will pay. Now, that's an upside, right? Because in a year, your rent doesn't change. You've signed a lease and it changes every 12 months. And it only changes to an escalation rate that is fixed. With your bond, it is up and down, depending on, hey, the financial year, the SONA. Every year we hear these announcements. And obviously the repo rate and inflation changes, all of those things affect your bond, right? But the upside of it is that you own a house that you can either flip at some point through selling it, or you can get a tenant, or you can live in it. And that's really your weighing of it, right? But the bottom line is, can I afford it at the end of the month? If you can afford a 20,000 or 15,000 Rand rent, can I afford something that's maybe 13,000 within the area that I like?
Is there a myth that you want to bust today?
Ooh, I think the biggest myth for me is you are tied to your decisions. Especially when you're buying young. The ability to sell gives you options. The ability to own gives you options. You now have an asset. Now, it needs to be an asset in its sense if it is an investment, right? But even if it's your home, you choose your why. If you are living in a place where you've rented, if your landlord comes back tomorrow and says, I want my house back, where is your stability scale at? And I think for me, that was my answer, really, right? I think that the biggest myth is, just because our parents are forcing us to buy houses, we shouldn't do that, it's better to rent. No, why are you actually buying? And tomorrow, if you had to move cities and you have a home, you still have the option of getting the tenant and making full use of that asset and making it an income-bearing asset. So I think for me, that would be my one encouragement to young people. It's not about fixing your feet to one place, but instead creating financial freedom for the long term. Because the reality is now, it's valued at double the value. If I decide to sell, I would have made far more. That is probably my biggest investment today. And I made it when I was 22, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And that was probably the best decisions that I made for myself, because now I've got more options to use this asset in 5 different ways, you know? And it's given me more access to more money if I need as backup, but also I've got a child. So that's going to go into his testamentary trust, and he has the option, should we keep it or hold it for so long, to sell in the future or hold it as well.
That is absolutely amazing. We've learned so much from you a year ago, and we've learned even more today. The future of home ownership for young professionals isn't coming. It's already here. Thank you so much, Jules, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
And to you, the young professional who may be starting out, or you've already taken your first steps, remember that as a young professional, there's always a thrill waiting for you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward.